Welcome once again to redux tutorial series. In the previous video, we created our action. So in this video, we are going to set up our reducer. Alright, so this is the format or the steps you are going to take anytime you start taking or creating your first application or application using Redux. There are so many ways of doing this, about setting up. Some people will start making up the store first, users and the actions. But I just want to make it very simple for you, so I'll have to make sure I use the simplest way of doing this. So now we understand what is action creator. Alright, so in this video, let's talk about reducer. Okay, so like I said, reducer will first check the action type coming from the action creator and a payload, and then it will do some logic here, whether it should add something to the store or remove or whatever, and then it will send the request to the store to take the real action. So let's see how this reducer is going to take the action and then do some logic and then send back to the store and then give us a response. So let's get started. So this is where we ended about creating our action. So let me close everything here, and then inside my folder, okay, let me create another folder. I haven't done it here. So under the reducers folder, let's create a file called to do reducer. Okay, so as you can see, now we can regard a reducer as a particular piece of state in your application. Alright, so assuming that in your application we want to handle users and to-dos, so inside your reducer we need to break down your reducer into small chunks. Okay, so for example, we may have what is called users reducers, and if you want to also handle, let's say, what do you call it? Maybe if you are creating a post, okay, let's say you are creating a blog post application. So we need post reducers, we need users reducers, we need comments reducers. Alright, so all these reducers are the piece of state that I want to keep track of. Okay, we can put all your state or reducers on one file, but to make it simple, we need to break them down into pieces. Okay, and if you have a pieces of reducers, if you want to combine them together, you use what is called combine reducer. Alright, so now because in my application is really small, we are keeping track only of to-dos. So we only have one to-do reducer. So now regard a reducer as a piece of state. Okay, like a piece of state that we are keeping track of. So in our case, our to-do reducer is when we're going to make the logic. So all the logics happens inside a reducer. So let me give a comment here about reducer. Okay, so I can say business logic also happens here. Alright, and it can also happen at the action creator. So now regard a reducer as what? As taking the request from action and do, and based on the payload and action type, the reducer will do some business logic and then send to the store. Alright, so let's create one reducer called add to do reducer. Okay, so const add to do reducer, and this is also a function. Alright, this is also a function, and this function takes two arguments or parameters here, right? So the first one is what? Your state, and then the action. So remember, every action type has its own reducer. Alright, any action type has its own what? Reducers. Again, every action type has its own what? Reducer. So look at the name, add to do reducer, and let's go to actions. We have to do action reducer. So we're going to handle all this logic, all this action type coming inside our reducer. Okay, So you're going to have 4 types of action type, 3 types of action types here: request, success, reset, and then dispatch. And remember, all these action type coming in has their own payload. Okay, so now our reducer is going to check, first of all, it's going to check the action type. Okay, action type. So a reducer is a function that takes the action, okay, the action type, and do logic inside our application. So let's continue what I mean. So anytime you are creating reducer, the first thing you need to do is you pass in 2 parameters here. The first one represents the state. Okay, when you say state, this state can be represented as a piece of state in this particular reducer. Okay, so by default, you always assign to initialize as that. For example, because we are dealing with only one to do, we need one object. So we can really create a variable here called, let's say, initial state. Initial state is equal to object, okay, like that. And here I can reassign my state as what? Initial what? State. Okay, so because this is a small application, I just want to have the declaration inside my function call. Okay, so now first of all, this reducer, we pass in the action. Okay, the way reducer will determine the kind of action coming in is done by redux. Okay, that's what is behind the scene. So right now, let's try to handle all these. Let's try to handle the action type coming in into this component or this reducer. All right. So now, let's continue. So this action needs 2 arguments again. One represents the state and the action that is coming into this reducer. So now let me open my curly braces and then start with something. So here we can say that if action dot type. Remember, all action has a type, right? So let's go to action. Okay, this is a whole action. Okay, dot what? Dot type. Okay, so we're going to check first of all for this one, add request. Okay, so when you say that action dot type is equal to add to do request, then we can do something with our state, right? The action type is equal to this, then we can turn on the state, but I want to make use of switch statement here. Okay, that's what is by convention we normally use. We can use if statement to change the action type, but I prefer to use, or by convention, we normally use the switch statement. The switch statement works the same way as what? As the if statement. Okay, so we're going to switch the action dot type. Okay, then the action dot type. Then the next step is that you need to have your case. When your case is add to do request, what do you want to do? Okay, then we are going to return our new object. Okay, so here let me explain one more time. When the action type, when the action is called and it's look through the reducers and check its action type. Okay, now the action type is add to do request. Then what do we want to return from here? From the action that is coming in, we need to return a piece of state here. Okay, so now we can assign loading to true. Okay, perfect. That's what you want. When you are trying to make a request, you want to put loading to true. So let's try in the application for me demonstrate what I'm talking about. Okay, so now let me refresh it and then let me try to add one to do. No, this application, this one. Let me refresh it and then this is a completed one. So let me use this one for demonstration. Let me go to add to do. Let me call this one HTML. Let me call this one learn. Okay, now when I hit add to do, let's go to our extension 2. as we saw, add request, add to do request. What do you see? I have this one, this action type, and there's no payload. But when it comes to the state, for add to do here, loading to true. Okay, so I'll come back to this, how we set up this extension tool. Okay, but for the sake of others, I have to, maybe some people are familiar with this tool. Right, so now that's why I'm handling this one inside my reducer. Okay, so now after we finish that, okay, add request, the next action type we are going to do is also make sure we have a case. Okay, so if the case is also add to do success, what do you want to do? Let's return new object. Here comes the magic. Then here we can add additional property to our state. Okay, so now we can say that, wow, then I need to have a success property on my state. I will say true. Okay, and to do itself is I want to get the payload coming from the action. Like I said, this action has, I'm handling this one. Okay, so action has a type and a payload. Okay, so dot payload is going to give me the request coming from the server. All right, so the payload here, that to do itself will be what? Pay action dot payload. Okay, I don't want to make use of end operator, so I'll make it like that. Good. Next, let's handle when something goes wrong. Now let's reset the application, to do the state when I finish creating it, so that I can have a way of what? Redirecting. So here, let's handle a case. When the case is add to do reset, then I want to return an empty state. I want to clear my state here. Okay, at this point here, at the first point, loading is true. The second point is loading is still true. So here, loading is supposed to be false. Okay, because I have finished creating it and it's not loading. So here, now look at the state. At the first start, I put loading into my state to true, and then on the second action call, I refill the whole state with these properties, and then when this one is called, then I have to empty the state. Alright, so next one is let's handle when something goes wrong. So in case add to do fail. Alright, then let's return and then send the error to the user. Okay, so here I will say loading is equal to false. At this point it's not loading, and then I want to send the error. Okay, it's on the payload. So the error, sorry, let me add a property on the error. It's called action.payload. Okay, that is where the error is coming from, this action, this error property. All right, that is it. Okay, so now we have our reducer. Next, we have to export this one, and then in the next video we are going to configure our store to have a complete setup of Redux. So catch you up in the next video. Before that, let me export this one to a different file. Let me even make use of export like that as a function call. So export like this, and this function is accessible in my component. So like I said, in the next video we are going to tackle this one, the store. Now we've done this one, we've done reducer, and then the last part is what? Set up our store. Alright, so thanks for watching.